God was sort of bringing all these new thoughts to us of how to do school differently, he would speak to me in the night and say things and wake me up, and I'd be like, wow.
Yes, I want to see someone's family economic situation turn around. But maybe I'm dreaming too big, but I want to see the world changed.
That revival is family. And Bill always has this statement that the light that shines the furthest shines the brightest at home.
After like, I don't know, the 17th, 18th, 19th conversation, I was like, this is spiritual. This is crazy. I thought it was just the way I processed the world. I didn't realize this was discernment in action.
All right, Mike, good to see you.
You too, thank you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too.
You're creating all kinds of amazing content right now, but you're also developing teams. You're here in Reading. You're just kind of going for it.
Yes.
Been here 11 years.
Yeah.
But you're originally from
Portland.
Yeah,
Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, that's incredible. So if we could just kind of dive in there, kind of into the genesis of Mike Maeshiro.
Okay.
And so how'd you get from Portland to Reading?
Man, the short version is I was working in the corporate world, climbing that corporate ladder, doing really well for myself actually at a pretty young age. And then I was at my desk Monday morning, pretty depressed because I had just gone on a trip to San Francisco with some friends. And around 1 o'clock, I look at this woman. And as I look away from her, I don't know what happened. I don't know how to explain this except for time got fractured into 4 different sections. By the time I looked at my screen, couldn't hear anything. The whole world stopped. And I heard in my mind, "What are you doing here, Mike?" And I was like, well, what is happening? And then he said, "You're not supposed to be here. I have something else for you." And then everything went back to normal. And I didn't realize that moment changed my life. I obviously had to go process and figure out what was going on.
So you're at work. It's like it's 1 p.m.
Middle of the day.
This lady walks by. You're like,
I look at her. Her name's Margaret. I was like,
okay.
Oh, Margaret's a believer, and so am I. We should probably be believers together in this environment. That was my random thought. It didn't really make any sense.
And then everything freezes. Reality gets cut into
as I look away from her, it starts to kind of like shift, and I'm like, what's happening? And by the time I look at my screen, everything has stopped, and I can't hear anything. The world is paused.
And then God's voice fills your headspace.
It was like he used the voice that I think my thoughts with and talked to me with it. I knew it wasn't me. It was like it was doing its own thing. I was like, what is happening? I was like, am I going crazy? This is weird.
It's very kind of Neo-ish. It's very kind of Matrixy.
The Matrix is my favorite movie for I think a lot of obvious reasons. But
awesome.
Yeah, it was. I'd never experienced anything like that.
Get on the floor. Crawl, Mike.
Exactly. He's like, yeah, exactly.
I said north. Awesome. Totally. Okay. All right. So now you're like, okay, I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah. All right. So I get home, talk to a friend of mine who is a big advocate for YWAM. She had done a few things with YWAM, and she kept trying to get me to go with Youth of the Mission. And I was like, I don't want to go be broke for Jesus. That does not sound like a plan that I want to be part of, because that's all I could like experience from people. But after this moment, I was like, you know what? I'm open to anything. I knew I had to leave my family, my friends, my job, the location. I had to leave everything. I knew that. I don't know how. It came with understanding. So we looked at the website, and there were discipleship training schools all over the world. I was like, holy cow, these people are very much doing their job. This is amazing. And then I saw there were a couple in Japan. My dad is Japanese. I was like, if I'm going to go anywhere, I might as well go there. I could learn more about that guy. That'd be great. You know, my dad and I have always been very different people. So I was like, I would love to understand his culture and all that better. So anyway, long story short, I applied for a DTS in Tokyo and got accepted. But it wasn't until like 8 months later that I actually ended up going. And in that time was when I started encountering Jesus on a regular basis, and he wrecked me, and I wept constantly.
Encountering Jesus, like that's like actual, like the physical form of Jesus.
Well, he wasn't physical. No. So that's a good question.
Yeah.
I was going to a college group every Friday night that John Mark Comer was doing called The Way with Solid Rock back then. They're a Jesus church now.
Yeah.
I think they've actually... Anyway, John Mark, I sat under his teaching for a while. He convinced me that God loved me. And I got saved when I was 4, so I did the religious thing my whole life, but I didn't know Jesus, you know? And so John Mark kind of paved the way in my heart as far as just teaching that God emphatically was passionate about who I was, whatever. I mean, all of us. Wow. And then from that place, it was one random Friday night at the college group. The worship team was on stage, just leading worship. And then all of a sudden, It's not like God wasn't there, but all of a sudden I was aware that he was there, and I wasn't separate from him anymore, and I couldn't protect myself from him, and I was shocked at how intense his presence was, how like I didn't know what holiness was until then. And I studied it and talked about it and whatever. I was like, I don't get this, but all of a sudden there he was, and I was like, I remember wanting to die. It was just so intense. His humility, his kindness, his innocence. I was dumbfounded. I did not know that God was like this.
Wow.
And I'd spent years like studying God, learning about God, telling people about God. You know, so all of a sudden, everything that I thought I knew and what was happening there was such a contrast and a discrepancy that I was undone. I just like cried a ton.
Wow.
For the first time, I was just like I had like a pool of my own snot and tears in my hands. It was gross. And then every Friday night that was happening, it didn't stop. I couldn't, I don't know like, if God was doing this himself or something changed in me, but like I could not protect myself from him. And then it started happening outside of Friday nights. Like it got bad enough that if someone said the name of Jesus, I would just start crying immediately because I just
mascara everywhere.
Yeah. Totally. I just could not fathom that Jesus was real. I couldn't believe there was someone like him in the world, and I didn't have like a resume that I was going off of anymore. I wasn't going off some book. I was like, I know this person. He's the most beautiful person I'd ever met, and he's real. And my brain could not compute, so I just cried all the time for like months. And a few of my best friends, every once in a while, one of them would pull me aside and be like, "Dude, are you okay? Like, I know you keep saying you're talking about Jesus and he's beautiful. We get that, and that's true, and I agree with you, but I'm concerned. Like, are you sure there's not like something deep, some pain or something that you're not understanding? Like, he's beautiful. And I just would be, I hear myself, I'm like, I sound like an idiot. I don't know what else to tell them.
It's incredible.
So that time, that was like a very constant thing going on. I had no idea he was rewriting everything about what I knew. And it was crazy. Anyway.
Yeah. That's amazing. And now that was all at YWAM. Is that right?
That was before YWAM.
Oh, that was all
in
before.
Portland. Yes.
Oh, my
stomping grounds. The Lord just started moving in my life, and once I made the decision to leave, all of a sudden this stuff started to shift, and he just moved in and started like cleaning house.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So then did you do the YWAM Japan thing?
Yeah. So in April of 2008, I moved to Tokyo and did the discipleship training school there.
Yeah.
Met a spiritual father of mine, Dave McDaniel. That's when I first found out about Bethel. The first Sunday service I went to in Tokyo, there was a team from a place called Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. And I'm coming from conservative side of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
So I was like,
they're all like sticking pennies to the wall and stuff.
Not yet, but at least they were doing that in Reading, not in Japan.
All right, yeah.
But I was like, is that like Harry Potter for Christians? Like, what are you talking about? I had no grid for supernatural Christianity.
Right.
So at the service, these two girls, like one of them called me out at the end. They're prophesying over people. I'd never seen that before. And so anyway, they called me out. I stood up, and then they started telling me some things about my relationship with the Lord and the anointing on my life that I had not really heard before. I mean, I'd heard some things, but they were pretty specific. And I was like, I think this might actually be God, and I didn't know what else to do with this, so I just wrote it down. I was kind of intrigued. The next week we did a treasure hunt, and I'd never done anything like that before. Found a guy explicitly the way I described him. I was like, what? So I'm like having to question some things and make some new choices about what the world really is and how God actually participates. And so that was like 5 months of me just having to like wrestle through some things. And I read When Heaven Invades Earth by Bill Johnson while I was there. I just wept.
Amazing.
Couldn't believe someone was teaching that stuff. Yeah, I'd been looking for for a long time, and I think I needed to go on that journey before I'd be willing to hear what Bill had to say. But yeah, so that time in Japan changed my life. I went from being a very heady, intellectual, cerebral Christian to starting to open up to the possibility that the Spirit could actually lead, but the Holy Spirit could lead me.
Yeah,
I didn't have a grid for it, so yeah.
That's incredible. So then at a certain point, you're like, these guys are from Reading, and they seem pretty cool and different.
Yeah, there's something like that going on. I went back to Guam. I'm from Guam originally, so I popped there for like 10 days on my way back to Oregon after the whole Japan thing. And I was just starting to pray and talking to the Lord about like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing when I get back. I don't even know what I'm doing here. Can you please, I don't care what you say, I don't care how you say it, please just don't let me go back to running my own life. Please tell me what to do next. Right? I mean, that was the heart cry was like, please tell me what to do next. Yeah. So I had a dream in Guam. Basically, long story short, tried to get Jesus out of his tomb. This woman wouldn't let me. We're fighting or disagreeing or whatever. And finally, she's like, we'll give you his garments. You have to drop this. His blood is no longer on my company's hands. And I was like, no, I want his dreams back from the dead. And I woke up out of a dead sleep. And I was like, what? And I knew something significant happened. So I just kind of scribbled it down and went back to bed. 2 weeks later, I'm in Portland. And I wake up and I hear it in that same voice in my head, this is not the cemetery I brought you to.
Wow.
And I was like, what does that mean? And my spirit knew immediately what that meant. The rest of me did not want to know it.
Yeah.
Because while Bethel was intriguing, I did not want to live in Redding, California. I was not interested in moving there. And so when the Lord told me again not to stay in Portland, I was not ready to hear that. I mean, I was open to going wherever.
I don't even fish.
Totally. I mean, I wanted more like direction than that.
Sure,
I wanted a little more detail.
Sure.
And so I went for a walk that morning with a friend, and I told her like what was going on, and the only place I could think to go was Redding. She's like, why don't you just move to Redding? I was like, whoa, I'm not going to move to Redding. This is my life we're talking about.
Right,
you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Anyway, 4 months goes by. I don't leave, and I go for walks every day. I'm just praying to the Lord. I'm like, God, would you please, like, I get, I'm going to be here. That's fine. Where would you like me to go? Anything else? He would not speak to me. It was rough. And I was like going through some weird, I guess we call it like persecution. I'm putting air quotes, but the people that I left behind in Oregon when I came back, like they were not happy about things I was talking about. They were super afraid, nervous, concerned.
Portland people are the worst. I'm just kidding. I just have fun.
It was the religious thing in my community, bro. No, my friends, like these believers who I was running with, like they were super threatened by and afraid of, like the Holy Spirit, like healing, miracles, prophecy. They did not have a grid for that stuff, and I had a lot of influence. So like my spiritual mentor from Portland was like, hey, I'm nervous because like people are going to follow Mike. And he didn't say this to me. He was talking to some people. That's how I found out. And
did they think that maybe you were like joining a cult or something?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, he did his research on Bethel, whatever research entailed. And he wrote me a 3-page letter telling me not to go to BSSM, that they would not teach me Jesus, that I should go to an accredited Bible school and that kind of thing. And I was so sad. I was like, I think that's probably the end of this relationship. I don't want that to be the case. We'll see if we can survive, but I'm going. I knew that was going to happen. I was starting to like come to terms with that. So anyway, I came home one day at the end of a busy day or whatever, still in Portland. Yeah. Closed the door to my bedroom, and I don't know how to describe, this is what I describe it as. There was a spirit in front of my window, and it was there to frustrate me, and I knew he was there, and I didn't have a grid for this stuff up to that point, but I was very aware, like there is something here that is here to ruin my life. And I was like, I gotta leave. And so a week and a half later, I'm driving with everything I have to Redding and moved, and that was in January 2009, and my life changed. And then so the Lord started meeting me there again. The story picked up. He started chatting it up again. I'm like, oh, thank God. Some prophetic words I got while I was in Tokyo started coming true in Redding, and so carried me through that weird little season there. But did first and second year at BSSM. And
Awesome.
Yeah, sorry.
So that would have been like, 2010, 2011 that you were at BSSM?
Yeah, wow. So I jumped in first year 2009, and then graduated in second year 2011.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. So what was that transition like, diving into BSSM with having like a sample, like you've had like a Costco sample, like you've had Bethel on a toothpick, right? But now you're actually like full immersion.
Oh man, Darren, I was there in January. School didn't start till September, so I had 8 months in the culture, in the environment, as like a civilian or whatever. So I started becoming friends with some students who are currently in the previous first year class that I would be in the next year.
Sure.
So I started like learning how to prophesy with them. I was going to like all the classes at Bethel I could. I didn't have any friends here. I went on walks a lot by myself.
Yeah.
I slowly started making friends and like plugging in and all that. So it was rough. I remember taking the fire starters class on Sunday morning at Bethel. That was, in hindsight, it's laughable. That's like one of the more extreme, like manifestation, joy of the Lord kind of classes Bethel has. That's the class I was going to, and I remember I was at a table, and the people at my table were drunk in the spirit, laughing their heads off, acting like absolute lunatics. And I was like, I remember it got to the point in one Sunday morning I was like, I think I might have made a mistake. Like, I don't know if I should be here. These people are insane. Like, I don't actually know if they're talking about Jesus anymore. I don't know.
They'll fall over their chairs.
They were just out of their minds. And it was just so, there was so much freedom and such a lack of clarity that I did not know what to do with it. Thank God I had a table leader.
Yeah.
And spared me. I got to ask her as honest as I could, like, what the heck? What do I do with this? Right. How is that in the Bible? And she kind of pointed out things in scripture, and I was like, crap, that is there. Okay, I see that. Interesting. And so as my mind started getting some like hooks to be able to grab onto, the rest of what I was seeing around me made less and less offense in my heart, and it made more sense. I don't know, I didn't identify with it, I didn't experience it personally, but I wasn't as like freaked out by it. So there was a bit of transition there. Thankfully I had some guiding hands along the way who could help me like adjust to the culture. But I also remember like probably 5 months into being in Redding, I missed like the reverence and this like my somber relationship with the Lord, and not like a sadness,
Sure.
but I had just such a deep reverence and like a stillness. And when it came to Bethel, everything was laughing and loud and expressive, and which isn't wrong or bad, but it was such a contrast to what my relationship with the Lord was like up to that
Sure,
point, and the
sure.
places that I met him. So I got out of practice of like being still and quiet and started trying to be more in the expressive place, which I think was good and helpful. But after a while, I started like feeling like I missed Jesus, you know? And not to say they didn't have him, but it was just a culture shock and a transition that I was like having to work through. So that was interesting. So by the time I got to first year, I had worked out some of that stuff and had a little bit of stamina and like a grid for the culture. So that was helpful.
That is, yeah. I mean, I always think it's interesting when you think of like just the quantity of students that come from all over the world, from all kinds of different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And we usually have a Bethel team come through our church every spring, you know,
Nice.
for mission trips.
Okay, nice.
And I'm always shocked at the diversity of students and the diversity of backgrounds.
Yeah.
And I always wonder, like, how do they do like assimilation? Like, because there's language and then there's such a culture, right? And so I was wondering if there's kind of like an assimilation kind of cultural immersion, sort of like, oh, when we use this word, this is what we mean, you know, and if this happens, this is how to react or not react, you know, but or if it's just basically like, get in, you know.
I would say it's a combination of both. Maybe a little more of the boot kicking, but I mean, it was 10 years ago, so I don't know if they've like changed this a bit, but definitely there were moments where there was some vernacular coaching, like, hey, you guys, when we say this is what we mean, this is what we don't mean. Back then they were running into students like doing outreach like at Walmart or Target or whatever, and then those stores like banning students from being able to do ministry, which we understand from a business standpoint, but like Bethel was having to try and manage some of those messes. And I think Bethel has done a great job like preserving a culture of freedom and empowerment, whilst also setting these new people up who do want to take these radical risks or whatever up for success, and learning how to like navigate relationship with the city and business and stuff, right?
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's a mess for sure to have to navigate, and I think they do a great job. So we do have a bit of like guiding along the way as far as like how to walk this out on a soul level, like, hey, you guys, yes, do anything the Lord's saying. However, remember, there are human beings who don't know him, and they're not going to perceive what you're doing, and some of this is risk, some of this you might be missing completely. Like, put some grace in there, put some space in there for you to actually renegotiate what this needs to look like or whatever. So yeah, I think they did a great job explaining that, and but a lot of it was go do it, you know?
Green light.
Yeah, totally. So it's like a happy little like mosh podge, and then you kind of work it out, you know? No, that's awesome. And then how were you able to find the balance again between kind of like the sacred and part of your relationship with the Lord, and then the playful fun part? Yeah, it's a great question. I guess,
or were you able to find? I'm assuming that you did find kind of.
I would say that I don't actually have a huge value for balance. So I wasn't looking for a balance necessarily. I just want an intimacy with the Lord, right? And so one of the most awkward parts of encountering the Lord like that and knowing him in that place is I can't make him show up. I don't know how to get him to do anything for me. You know what I mean? Like, God, it's time. Like, would you just like wreck me again? Like, I don't know how to get him to do that. You know, I wish I could, and I wish I could give that to other people. I don't know how. And so that makes my walk with the Lord, for me personally, a little bit awkward. Like, all I know to do is just bear witness, tell my story, whatever. But I don't know how to get him to like black them out like he did me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to do that. And if someone does, I'm like, I'd love to learn how to do that, but I don't know how. So I don't know that I ever balanced it. I think that I continued to just do what I could with what was in front of me and just continue to seek the Lord. And there were moments where he would come. It was nowhere near as intense or as regular as it was in Portland. And I don't know if that was like I don't know about like a seasonal thing or like a initial thing. There were moments where he would come like that. And I'm like, I could breathe again, right? But it definitely has become more infrequent. And I think partly that's because of what I'm focusing on and what I'm doing. And the other part is, I think, just what's been established and what has matured. Like, the Lord meets me in different ways now, and I don't ever not want that to happen. Of course, like, I love it, and it does happen every once in a while. But I don't know that I have a lot of authority in the matter. I don't know how to, like, regulate it or whatever. So, anyway, I don't know that I found a balance, but the best I know to do is be faithful with what he's given me, continue to say yes, and trust that he knows what he's doing. Once the best for me, better than I want for myself, and he's more capable. And so as I continue to just agree with his intention and nature toward me, like I let him work it out. And I think I've just a lot over the last few years let go of trying to produce certain outcomes in my experience with the Lord. You know, and not because I don't want them, but because I don't know that's how that played out. You know, I guess that's probably the best.
Absolutely. So now you're like, discernment, that's like a big part of like your gift mix and just and also what you're equipping people in.
Yes.
And you also talked about like you were aware of this spirit in Portland that was like trying to frustrate you, where you knew it would be unhealthy for you to stay there. And so did that start to become kind of like a pattern? You started to become more and more aware of spirits.
Great question. Yes, great question. It didn't become a pattern. What happened was, on the second day of first year, I was looking for a place to sit. I didn't know anybody in school, and there was this woman sitting in a chair with some people. I bounded over to her. I knew in my spirit. The rest of me did not understand, but I had learned how to like follow the spirit a few times in my life, and this was one of those moments, and I just said yes. So I ran over to her and asked if I could sit next to her, directly next to her. And there were all these empty seats along the road. She was like, okay, moved her purse out of the seat I wanted to sit in because I wanted to sit which in hindsight, I'm like, yeah, I look crazy. So I sat next to her. Within the first 2 minutes, out of her mouth comes, I see evil. I know when people are lying. She starts describing deliverances she was part of in a ministry. She was in another country. And I was like, what the heck is happening? Because I didn't have a grid for that stuff. I was like, is this girl crazy? Is this real? Like, wow, these students are weird, you know? Like, I didn't have a grid for what I didn't know that she was super unique in that environment. Anyway, we sat next to each other for the rest of school together. Like, we did life together. We became really good friends. We had a bunch of common friends, whatever. She mentored me in discernment. So my mentor in Japan was gifted in discernment, walked me through some stuff. I didn't have a grid for it, so I couldn't receive as much from him during that space. But then when I got to Bethel and met her, like, she... just really invested in me. We wrestled. We fought so much. I don't know if wrestling is the right word. We fought all the time because she was so dominant and aggressive in her opinions about things, which in hindsight, we both looked back and like, yeah, that wasn't awesome. That could have been better. We both could have done things better, right? We're going through first year. We're losing our minds. But it was but what she was saying was so foreign to me. I could not track where she was coming from, how she knew these things, the audacity to say that about other people, about situations. Like I didn't have a grid to really put that in my Christian box and it feel good, you know? So I got to work through even that cultural shift and mindset shift and all that. And a year and a half went in and we worked it out. We wrestled. There were moments that worked great, but there were things that she could track, and the way that she tracked them, I'm like, I do not know how you're doing this. I don't get it. We stopped being friends for like 5 or 6 months maybe, just because I needed a break. I was like, listen, I can't keep doing this. This is exhausting, whatever. At the end of second year, I had like a 21-day period where multiple times a day, every day, for 21 days, I don't know why. I'm not one of those people that but that happened. These epiphanies or these revelations would hit me. I'm like, oh, this is what's going on in my life. This is why. And then the next immediate thought is, oh, and she told me this like 10 months ago. She told me this last year. Like, just repeated confirmation. I was like, dang. And so she'd constantly like expected me to be discerning and to pick this stuff up and have a grid for it. And I believed her, but I wasn't getting it. All of a sudden, you know, at that point, finally, things started to click. And so I started taking risks and like applying what I thought I knew to my relationships and asking questions. I started saying no to evil in my relationships. I'm like, hey, I think this is going on, or this is hitting me in a certain way. I don't love this. And I started finding language to express this. Because I lied up to that point most of my life. I didn't realize... I wouldn't have called it that, but in sincerity, like I was being dishonest because no one around me was paying attention to the things that I was responding to. Like, because I could feel when people were lying to me, and I could experience like when stuff was twisted or when there was a motive there that had an ulterior motive or an agenda going on that wasn't awesome. And so I just constantly like learned how to pretend like what people were telling me was the truth, and I treated them as if that's what was going on. But underneath, I didn't like regard them like that in my heart, and I constantly was guarded in that way because of the discernment piece, and I didn't know that's what it was. So when I started getting a grid and some language for what was happening to me, and realizing that this wasn't just me judging people and making stuff up, but that it was actually me responding to things in the spirit, I had to experiment and test that quite a bit to prove this was in fact what was going on. And after like, I don't know, the 17th, 18th, 19th conversation, I was like, this is spiritual. This is crazy. I thought it was just the way I processed the world. I didn't realize this was discernment in action. And the biggest like takeaway for me was not just my own personal freedom. That was huge. But watching the radical transformation in people around me. Everyone started saying the same thing. No one has ever told me this before. I know exactly what you're talking about. And right now, all these memories are flooding my mind of that very thing, and I never knew what to do with it. And so people started shoving me into this place where, like, please tell me, what do I do? No one has ever addressed this in my heart. I've always felt alone here, and you see it. What is it? And I'm like, I don't know. And so I would do my best to try and like help them have some like tools or how to move forward or whatever. But
that's incredible.
I was talking about the spirit, you know, like the things that people agreed with. I mean, there's so much agreement with the enemy in people's hearts because they don't know the Lord there. They haven't said yes to him in that place. And so the enemy was a sloppy like replacement or alternative, you know? And so from that stuff releases something in the spirit, and then discernment can pick that up. Like, anyway, so I just started finding language and how do I walk people through this stuff? And that was 8 years ago, you know.
That's incredible, finding language for what you're discerning, because I think a lot of times one of the things I've noticed when it comes to discernment is that people tend to go either super aggressive, or they go just super passive,
totally,
or they go super passive aggressive, you know.
Totally.
So to be able to develop like an assertiveness with a graciousness, that's very special, and I imagine that's really what is flavoring a lot of the teaching that you're doing, is being able to discern, but then being able to articulate what you're sensing in a way where it produces healthy relationships, and not just, you know, blurting out what you're seeing and fracturing relationships with that intel. You know?
Totally, I mean, it's divisive, it's harmful, it's accusatory, it's condemning. If you don't discern things with the Lord, things can get really messy. The gift doesn't take care of it itself, right? You need really the Spirit of the Lord to guide how your gift operates, for sure.
Have you noticed, man, like I've seen people that you could say that they're super prophetic. They might say that they're super discerning. It kind of cracks me up because my kids, I got a 3-year-old, 5-year-old, and an 8-year-old, and they wrote this song. He goes, "You are super prophetic, baby." So whenever I think super prophetic, I was thinking of that song. We're hoping to turn it into like a pop song.
I like that.
You know, the boy band, you know, girl band, I guess. But like what I'm wondering is, like one of the things I've noticed is that sometimes when people go through severe trauma as a child, almost to the point of death, and there's this point of just like having to survive like this severe trauma, that it's almost like people develop the ability to read people out of mere survival, like in order to make sure that I'm going to survive. That ever had I need to read you and read you quickly to know if you're somebody that I'm going to allow myself to get close to, because I will not let you take my life, right? Like, so I imagine a lot of this is subconscious, like running in the background. But I've known some people that have been able to read people incredibly accurately, and but I've noticed kind of a theme or a trend there. So I wanted to ask you about that, as far as when it comes to it's probably a question of like the difference between discernment and suspicion, or is there a place where actually trauma can unlock even spiritual gifts?
That's a great question. Fascinating, Darren. You've done some research. I like it.
It's not really research. It's more just like some stuff that I've lived through, just through, you know.
Well, I mean, you've paid attention, you've taken note, and like observed, right? Like that's a specific thing you're looking at. That that's fascinating. Sorry, research. I think we all, as human beings, have spiritual sensitivity, and I think that people who experience extreme trauma or pain or whatever probably tend to tap into some of that because they're motivated. They have a reason to like explore that aspect of their being. I don't think they're doing it with their head. Some other part of them is grabbing onto what's available to try and produce like some level of success in their environment based on what they're working against. So I think that your ability to read somebody, there's a spiritual, we might call it intuition, right, that you can tap into, that I think is straight up available to all of us. And I think a lot of people don't practice it because they don't need to. Life's fine. They're okay, right? So I think the trauma piece very much provides incentive. It causes people to be willing to do the work of going inward and paying attention and putting in the diligence, because it does take practice. I don't know that I've ever been traumatized to the point of death or anything. I've experienced trauma as a kid, I think. When I hear other stories of trauma, I'm like, is mine trauma? I don't know. Right? Because like, but not that to diminish my pain, but I think I definitely had motivation as a kid growing up. to explore this because of my relationships with my family. My parents are awesome, but just going through this stuff, I was always very sensitive, and so I didn't know what to do with a lot of what I picked up, and so I learned at a pretty young age, like, I don't think these people know the answer to what I need. I didn't have this in English in my head. I just kind of reacted that way.
Yeah.
So I went inward pretty early as well, and I think that's a big part of how I developed my awareness and sensitivity to these things. Obviously, going through BSSM and working with some people in particular that helped me get grid and language for what I was already like competent in. So I think that people from trauma can tap into spiritual sensitivity and awareness. I would say I would differentiate discernment from spiritual sensitivity. I think that discernment is a gift from the Holy Spirit. We have discernment in general, and then we've got the supernatural ability to distinguish between spiritual influences or spirits. And so in that, I think that the gift helps you identify what is this spirit. What is it not? What is it doing? How did it get here? It comes with that kind of ability to track. You don't just know all that right away. You have to hone your powers of discernment, right, through constant practice to be able to tell the difference between good and evil. So that's talking about all of our general discernment, but then it's also, I think, applicable to the gift of discernment. You got to practice this thing. You have to work out a relationship with how it operates, because the gift will come with guidance, instruction, clarity, warning, all the things. But if you react out of fear to what discernment's telling you, you're not going to end in a place of like wholeness or like solution or benefit. You'll just be tied up. My discernment was I call it an affliction for most of my life. Like I was bound up by that thing because I didn't know what was happening to me. So I couldn't like respond, let alone like help anybody else when I was so like buried by what discernment was doing to me, right? So I was like a victim. I'm putting the air quotes on that, but it felt that way. Like I felt like a victim to my gift, and I thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't think I was crazy, but I knew something was off. I'm super moody, whatever. So I do make a distinction between someone being a feeler and someone having the gift of discernment. I think the trauma piece causes people to tap into a competency in that area. I think everyone has the capacity to feel like feelers do.
Sure.
And some people, I think, go there because they have to, so they get good at it.
It's more of a, for some people, it's more of a luxury, and then other people, it's more of a necessity.
Yeah. And I would say, like, from my experience, what I've observed, I was born this way. I didn't like seek this thing out. Maybe at a young age I just tapped into it, perhaps, but I see it in my family line pretty pronounced. I see a lot of people, before me and around me in our family who are also moving in discernment, and it's interesting, like the way they used it and how they perceive the spirit is unique. It's different than how I do, but I do see a common thread of the ability to separate what's happening in the spirit realm. And this is even with family members who don't know the Lord. I see them operating in it as well, and with the way they think it's helpful or whatever, which is so intriguing. So I think there's a gift that gets passed generationally. From my experience, I think that's true. I see some of that in scripture where Paul's talking to, I want to say probably Barnabas. Oh, I'm missing it right now. But the gift of faith passed from his grandma to his mom to him, right? Like watching this thing being passed. I don't want to die on that hill. I don't need to like convince anybody that's a thing, but I think that that's a piece. The other part is I think people can tap into it. They can learn, they can be trained in this, and their spiritual senses can like be disciplined in this area to operate in supernatural ability the Lord does provide. So I think it's an interesting combination of both.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And I haven't actually gone through your course myself, but our young adults have gone through it at Seattle Revival Center. They loved it. It's very, very helpful.
Good. Thank you.
And it's super intriguing. I mean, what I love is that here you are, a very grace-based, because a lot of stuff that comes out with discernment, it's very, I think it's very kind of like, there's a lot of kind of fear-based marketing behind it.
Totally.
You know, and so I like, and sometimes that fear-based stuff kind of develops more of a spirit of suspicion.
Yep. Totally.
And
it comes with accusation and punishment as well, which are very contrary to the kingdom of the Lord.
Yeah.
He doesn't operate that way. So when your gift is used to do those things, you're actually working for the enemy. But yeah, it's very rampant in that conversation.
Yeah. Okay, and now you're doing another kind of ministry where it's kind of taking discernment, but it's kind of taking it to the next level. So it's kind of taking this principle of discernment and then unpacking it kind of systematically with the Holy Spirit in order to see people get set free.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
What's it called? What does it look like? You know?
Well, I think we have a few.
Can we do it right now?
You wanna? Let's go. We have a few different expressions.
What's the most shameful thing you've ever done? Let's start there.
I think that your theology, I think your relationship with the Lord, I think your willingness to follow him very much influence how you're going to operate in the discernment realm, right? The gift is there to separate what's happening in the spirit. It is there to judge. And that's really awkward for Christians because we're taught not to judge. Jesus said, don't judge lest you be judged, right? The measure you use will be used against you.
That's like the one verse that every non-Christian knows, right? Like the Bible says, don't judge.
Right.
Totally. Where's that at? I don't know. It says, don't judge.
And I see Christians do that as well. Like they inadvertently like accept that as a label or a standard. And so they do judge. They just don't talk about it. They lie and pretend like they don't think that thing, or they don't see it, or whatever. I see a lot of dishonesty in Christianity. We're all very polite. We're really nice. Just we're dishonest. And I don't think people call it that. They think they're loving people. And I'm putting air quotes on that because that is not love.
Right.
And so I've got a huge I've declared war on what a lot of people call love and trust in our culture. I'm like, that is not love or trust. When you look at the spirit of what you're doing, it's not love. It's not trust, right? That's a whole different conversation.
Love,
it's conditional and it's based on our perception of morality and like right and wrong, not based on the spirit of God. And where does love come from? We can't come up with that stuff. We can do all the right stuff without love, Anyway, so that's a huge piece of how you practice and exercise discernment in an environment. So one of the beautiful, and this is something I teach pretty intensely. The most important thing to discern is the Lord, right? The spirit of love. And then the next most beautiful thing that I can discern in the spirit is the spirit of a person. Like what God put into motion, what he said yes to, what he breathed life in, that has a frequency to it. That person has a certain expression. And so when people say yes to the enemy and they agree with what the enemy told them about who they are, how they're supposed to influence or what they're allowed to do or not, you can feel it because you can discern their spirit. And so anything that comes from not the Lord, not his design for them, comes with like a jagged output reader. Like it's off. It throws you off. And they're not necessarily trying to lie to you, but as a discerner, it feels like they're lying because it's inauthentic to who they are. And you don't know that. Like, I wish someone could have told me that as a kid. I wish I could have known the difference because I thought people were just lying all the time. And in the spirit, it's the same. They're all lying. But they're not trying to. I don't think they're coming at this from a dishonest place. They've said yes to something inferior. And so that's the only thing they know. And so they're trying to give you what they've learned and behaved in. It's just not true, right? So it feels like lying. Anyway, so being able to discern who people are is so valuable in the thing you're describing when you're talking about like how do we help people get freedom in the discernment area. We have coaching, so we call it spirit coaching, right? I've got coaches that work with me. We take clients, they work with us. The whole point is to help discern who are they, what are they made out of, what are they supposed to be like in their context, in their story, in their relationships, and then what are the things that they've said yes to that are coming against who they're supposed to be, what the Lord intended for them. Not some necessarily predestined, like required, like course of action, but more like an alignment and a submission to what the Lord has said about them in whatever context they're in. And so we work with people to help like identify what they've agreed with in the spirit, good or bad. Usually we like address the negative, not because we're afraid of Satan or what he does. He has no power in this. But when people believe him and they've accepted what he proposed in that area about them or whatever, then it is energized by their faith, and then it produces and it kills them, right? It steals, it destroys, right? So it's like seed form. The enemy does that. And then when they agree, it has its effect, right? And so we definitely spend a lot of energy and time helping people recognize that stuff. And like usually once they see it, Ephesians 5:13 says anything exposed by the light becomes visible. Anything that's visible is light. And so when even the things that the enemy has touched and used against you in your own life, when that gets exposed and you see his hand all over it, you see it for what it is. It's not, you don't have to like rebuke him, bind him, blow the shofar, whatever. You don't have to do any of that stuff. Once you notice it, the thing loses its power. When your heart actually recognizes the truth, the shift already happened. You don't have to make this happen. I call it the dynamic of light. It just like strips the thing.
Then you blow the shofar.
If you want to blow the shofar, man, blow the shofar.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is appropriate. I don't want to like knock that entirely. I have a value for. The thing is, what I'm going to go after is agreement. If the Lord says to do whatever, then do it. You want to align yourself.
These face to face, but do you also do these things online?
Most of the clients we work with are online, actually. Really? So they're like other places. Yeah.
Is it a set amount of hours, or is it kind of like an ongoing kind of coaching process?
It depends on the
you're
person.
My coach, and we're doing life together.
Yeah, well, Yeah, it depends on the person. So it depends on what they're coming for. So some people just want to fix this thing in their finances or in their marriage or whatever. Yeah. Some people want someone to be in their boat for a long term and to just help them walk through shifting multiple things in their life. I think that's the more ideal approach. I think that's where we're most effective.
Yep.
Having a coach kind of walk alongside you on a regular basis, successively, right? I think people see the most radical breakthrough and like transformation. We call it fruit that remains, Jesus describes. I think they're actually able to get something that will stick around by having a coach go with them through many different things.
What are some red flags? Like, what are some things that people might be thinking or feeling that are red flags where it's like, hey, some coaching would probably be good?
Yeah. If you start noticing cycles or patterns of behavior or choices that you can't get out of, that you know you don't want, that you wished your life could be different, but you cannot see a way out, like, I'm like, hey, you need a coach. Because I would say a spirit coach, because that person is going to help you identify, like, turn the light on to see why this room is getting, like, destroyed the way that it is. You can see the perpetrator in the room once the light turns on.
That's awesome.
So I think that's a huge one. Another one would be...
Great example.
Thank you. Yeah. Another one would be like when you continue to recognize a narrative in your life, in your head, even your heart, where there's a voice saying things like, you suck, you're not enough, that'll never happen, you can't have that, yeah, everyone else can, but you can't. That kind of stuff, people don't usually realize that's not them. If you're a born-again believer, it is unnatural for those things to be coming up. It's not coming from you. It's not coming from the Lord. It's the enemy. And it's because you've agreed with him in that place that voice gets to speak to you. And I'm not going to make this like a big, like, oh, you need deliverance. I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Sure.
But a lot of people identify with that voice, and so they don't think that there's an enemy involved. They think that they just have brokenness or an issue to work out. And I'm like, no, I'm blowing the whistle. This is not your issue. The problem is you believe a voice that's there to destroy your life, and you think it's you. The biggest thing he's got on you is you think that's you.
Yeah.
And once you recognize it's not you, and we can help you separate who you are from all the other junk that's going on, it's not hard. The difficulty is being able to admit, what if you're actually not that broken?
Yeah.
What if you're not that trapped?
Wow.
What if you're not that powerless?
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it takes guts, it takes faith, it takes courage to be willing to meet the Lord there. But if you're willing to, oh my God, everything changes.
Yeah, it's fascinating. As a man thinks in his heart.
So is he.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
All right, let's take a break real quick.
Okay.
Is that okay? I got to pee.
Nice.
So Mike, you got like a team of 35 people, is that right?
Yes.
And you guys are doing all kinds of stuff. But one of the things that you're really passionate about is creating like a culture of discernment, or creating discernment cultures.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that. What does that look like?
Man, I don't really know how else to live life. You know what I mean? This is something I was doing my whole life, but after my renaissance of just like, whoa, I can help other people, and they recognize this stuff. People know what I'm talking about. You know, like, I'm not crazy, and it's actually like resonating and translating to them. I was like, maybe they could tap into this too. So I've spent the last 7 years intentionally working with people in my environment, in my community, like to change their perspective and attitude about what's going on interpersonally, socially, all the things. Because the thing is, like, we all like to think about church and ministry as like a compartmentalized part of our life, and then when we're having fun or hanging out with friends, like, we're off duty or whatever. So no one tries to do it, it just kind of happens. But the thing is, like, when you're hanging out, when you're watching a movie, when you're playing games, when you guys are going on a walk, or you're going to meals, whatever, the spirit world didn't turn off. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't clock out of the spirit realm. That stuff's still happening. And I think that's actually a hotbed for where a lot of agreements get made. People say yes to stuff that they wouldn't otherwise because of relationships in their life, because of what this person means to them, or because of what they said yes, or how they taught them. Well, I think a lot of our agreements are imparted to us. We learn them from other people. Most people learn a ton of like spiritual agreements from their parents. Like, it's not just social conditioning, you know what I mean? It's like you're actually tapping into things in the spirit your parents tapped into, which will go beyond seasons. It'll go beyond social conditioning or whatever, right?
Wow.
Anyway, so as we go after that as a community, we have a lot of values that got us, like, that popped up. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just became pretty evident these are necessary. One of them that's pretty obvious, that's not popular for people in general, is we have a culture of confrontation where I actually expect people in my environment, and I've demonstrated this, to call people out, not to accuse them, not to punish them, not get mad at them. You might get mad, but you process through it, and then you come to the person and you address, like, hey, this freaked me out. Hey, this hurt my feelings. Hey, this sucked for me. Hey, I don't like this. We have those conversations, and there's a whole protocol that we go through. It's not like a 1, 2, 3 step situation. It's more of a heart posture where we're very invitational. We follow curiosity. Like, these are values in our culture, where you expect and believe that the person that you're with, whoever they are, whatever you do discern about them, you believe that they are that person. And if they operate outside of that, if you pick up anything from the enemy, they need you to say something, to point it out, not to police them by any means, but to invite them back into the light. This is very biblical. Paul instructs us in multiple different ways how to win our brother over, right? So we definitely practice and go after that.
That's good.
Huge part of how we walk it out.
Yeah, culture confrontation. That's always good, except for when there's just one guy in the culture that does all the confronting, and then you're like, dude, you're uninvited from the culture of let's get some other people invited.
Right. Well, what I found is,
what the heck, dude? What the heck? Like, don't what the heck me, dude? Sorry.
When people are empowered, like, no one gets away with that. They don't get to just like run amok. You know what I mean? And we've got a couple people in our environment who are stronger. They're more dominant and aggressive. They're in check. They're not like punished. They're not blacklisted. You know, like they're invited into, hey, you don't get to treat people like that. What's the deal here? And then they get to look at it, and everyone gets to embrace humility or offense. And there's a constant choice there, and we all get to navigate that.
Man, it's so neat. I know that in Seattle, we partner with a couple of different missions and shelters, and the Union Gospel Mission in Seattle has just an incredible success rate in seeing people get set free off of drugs. So talk about high grace culture, right? Like you have people coming right out of prostitution, homelessness, severe addiction, and so it's a high grace culture, but it's also an incredibly assertive culture where there's a lot of confrontation. There has to be, because the only way you can sustain a high grace culture is to have such a value for healthy conflict resolution. And so I think that's amazing.
Thank you. I've seen a lot of fruit from it. I'm like, if I were to leave here and start over with a whole different group of people.
So that's like a thing that you guys do. You actually go into an organization or to a culture and teach how this looks and how to do it in a healthy way.
Yes. I'm working on having more and more people on my team be able to step into that conversation. But yes, we do. I especially do that, but some of my people do it with me. Yeah.
That's great.
It's great.
Very cool. Very, very. All right. Now, let's talk about your love and passion for business or the marketplace and seeing people begin to run with that, or maybe even seeing people in the marketplace and they're not being fruitful. There's not a lot of effectiveness. So I imagine you're helping entrepreneurs on all sorts of different spheres and levels.
Yes.
But where does that love and passion where does that come from?
Yeah, I think that I've been an entrepreneur from a pretty young age. When I was in third grade, I sold erasers to my classmates. I found out that the student store sold them for a lot cheaper than any of us knew, and I would just charge a certain, like a more for profit, right? And I managed it, and I like marketed it, and I helped people realize the value here. And so I like was running a little side business there until my teacher caught wind of it, and then the government shut it down. You know, just like my business got taken away from me.
Awesome.
But I learned something there. Yeah. But I also, in hindsight, I'm like, wow, that's actually really indicative of me. That's been in my life. That's been in me my whole life. So I couldn't like quite get on board with the way school was or just traditional employment. It never made sense to me. I couldn't figure out how people allowed this to be such a long-term solution. I was like, how can you live this way? It just never computed for me. And so I get that that's not normal or common, but I'm actually finding it's a lot more common than people like to talk about. Anyway, so when I was 25 years old, I started like really going after, okay, what would it look like for me to be an entrepreneur? And I started following a bunch of other entrepreneurs on social media that were doing what I wanted to do. Like they were living the life I wanted to live. Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be that person. Because I didn't want to just go to churches. I didn't want to do the circuit of conferences talking to the same Christians on repeat. You know what I mean? I wanted to talk to people who were looking for answers and solutions, whether they called Jesus Lord or not. I wanted to like help them and watch them encounter the truth and see the Holy Spirit invade, and then even see people come to Jesus because of that.
That's awesome.
I think there's an evangelistic part of me in that. I've always loved the secular environments I worked in growing up. I had such a passion watching people experience the love and the truth of God and accountability in that place, and them being hungry for it and being responsive and desiring it. And I've seen that across the board. Everybody wants Jesus. They're offended with Christianity or people or messes or whatever, right? I mean, I'm not saying everyone. Anyway, so I started like dabbling in entrepreneurship myself, taking risks, casting my lot, and then when I was 29, I had 3 or 4 different side hustles that grew past my main salary as a full-time employee. So I quit my job at 29, those few years ago, and have been self-employed ever since. And I'm super passionate about the entrepreneurship thing because I think the traditional model of employment is not setting people up for success long-term especially, but I think especially my biggest problem with that system is it encourages people not to think. It encourages them not to dream, to like let go of hoping and like exploring and having faith. I'm not saying that's true across the board. I'm saying I see that as a pretty common theme.
Yeah, totally.
And especially for myself, when I was under it, I was like, I'm not rewarded to dream. I'm not rewarded to like think outside the box, to be creative in my solutions, problem solving. Like that's not, and I'm not incentivized to do that. I'm paid for the position I hold in a structure, and and so it just feels really limited, and it feels to me like it's contrary to the nature of the Lord. And if people can do better than this, why wouldn't they? And I see a lot of them not choosing it, and I think it's because they just don't know any better. So I feel very passionate about waking up people and being like, hey, there's a whole other option here. I'm not saying it's the only one, but this thing actually incentivizes you to be creative, to be exploratory, to be curious, to take risks, to be brave. And I want those attributes in people. I mean, cowardice is not in the kingdom, and we see a lot of it all over the place, and it's just so inappropriate. It's sinful to be fearful. It's not okay, and a lot of us accept it in certain ways. It's like socially acceptable. I'm like, this is crazy. You can't. And I'm not trying to say everyone, you're sinning if you're not an entrepreneur. I'm saying if you're hiding from life, you're not trusting Jesus, and that I have a problem with, right? So anyway,
I'm thinking of the lion in the Wizard of Oz with the little bow in his hair. Totally. And can't roar.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the poor lion, like just prancing down the yellow.
Yeah. There's so many domesticated cats running around. I'm like, you're so much more than that.
With little bows.
Yeah. Totally. So I want to go and just snip the bows off everybody.
That's awesome.
Be like, hey,
yeah. It's time to roar.
It's time to like eat, It's time to hunt. Go make stuff happen.
Awesome.
Like the Lord put desires in you.
That's awesome.
They're not just going to happen. You've got to go hunt. You know what I mean? You don't earn this from the Lord. You go agree with him. You go prove to the world that he's right. That you trust and believe him regardless of your circumstances, regardless of what people say. Like you get to go demonstrate what intimacy with him looks like, and the monument gets erected, and maybe it's a business, maybe it's a movement, a ministry. I don't care. But go pursue that. Don't just let someone pay your bills and be dependent on them for the rest of your life on what's possible. Like that, I have a big problem with that. Just the heart posture and the attitude there. I'm not saying being employee is wrong or bad. I'm saying I think it's a temporary solution for you to get to where you're supposed to with what the Lord's asking of you. And I hope this is burning in people's hearts right now. I'm like, hey,
man, you're going for it.
It's real.
No,
it's
awesome.
a thing.
It's
You're
awesome.
not crazy. There's something there. You're accountable to it. The measure, the talents you've been given, there needs to be an increase. You got to like multiply that sucker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so we started. Go ahead.
I was going to say ministry is interesting, right? Because
Yeah.
on one hand, when you're in ministry or you're a minister, you're basically self-employed as far as the government's concerned.
Right.
But it's different than being self-employed, because if you're a self-employed entrepreneur, you have a certain set of wins that are going to determine if you're successful or not.
Totally.
And usually that's determined by your profit, your profitability as a company.
Mm.
But it's not necessarily the case in ministry, because in ministry, your declaration is as a non-profit, right? And so a lot of guys go into ministry thinking I'm a non-profit organization. So there's almost like this subconscious defeater that's like that's almost like, if I'm in ministry, I'm not allowed to profit, or it's like illegal for me to profit. And when I was in the marketplace before I became a pastor, I was all my jobs were commission-based jobs. So if I needed to make more money, I knew how to do that. And for me, it was really a difficult transition coming into being a lead pastor at 27, because I remember I don't know if I asked our board of elders this question or not, but I remember thinking like, okay, so this is how much money I'm making right now. All right, so I could always control my income. I've always had full control of my income, and now for the very first time ever, I don't have control of my income. But I wanted to figure it out. Where's the volume knob on in ministry when it comes to income? And that's an awkward question to ask. And it was almost like, so how does church world work? Like, is it by church size? Like in order for my salary to be here, does the church have to be this big? Or like, those are like questions that and those are things that they don't really talk about in Bible school, you know?
Totally.
But it is weird, because when you're a lead like a lot of guys, when they go into ministry, they think that pastors just preach. But no, you have to have a business savviness if you're going to be in regardless if you have an executive pastor or whatever else, right? So there needs to be more entrepreneurs, I think, in the church.
Totally.
And there needs to be more church people being entrepreneurs. Yeah. But it's a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I have such a huge passion for that. I think we need
It's a weird
more,
kind of conversation, though, because people freak out. Like, if you're a businessman, you're allowed to talk about income and profitability.
Interesting.
But like, if you're in the church, you start talking about profitability and income, people are like, oh, you're one of them,
Yeah. Which is a stigma that's like, this is not based on truth or facts. This is based on like offense and perception, and totally. So we actually at Numa we expanded a whole new branch. We call it Nouveau Riche, rebranding like a term. Nouveau Riche. It's a French term. It actually is derogatory for like people who generate wealth in their own generation.
Wow.
Old money looks down on them because they're unrefined, they're new to the game, whatever.
That's cool.
I'm like, that's awesome. How many people were not handed wealth in their lifetime, but could generate it now, especially in the time that we live? So I wanted to take that term and move it over from derogatory to being like, provocative and like empowering.
Yeah.
So I have a whole crew on my team dedicated to helping people who have an interest or a value for stepping into the entrepreneurship world, but maybe haven't done it before, don't have any grid for it, don't know where to start. We have an event coming up in November called Entrepreneurship, and it's for people who just haven't actually stepped into that stuff yet. And we're going after how can we equip and empower these people, starting with their beliefs. There's so much offense and like ignorance and bitterness there that's not real. It's not based on truth, and it is not productive. It's not adding life to people. So like, hey, let's change that stuff. And then once you don't have Satan whispering in your ear about money, what's possible? What is the Lord doing there? What if you weren't just running this off your own understanding? What if you were open to something deeper than this? What if God wants you to have more than you know what to do with, so you can be a resource and a blessing? So that's
awesome.
Yeah,
that's amazing. And we'll make sure that we put in the show notes links to all of these resources, because I know that people are gonna be listening to this being like, I want it.
Yeah.
Like I need that.
Oh man, yeah.
I need a coach, and then I can get my business off the ground, right?
Totally.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right, now I found out about you from your discernment course, but then of course the next follow up was, and you've got to check out his YouTube channel because Mike is doing this like movie review thing on YouTube, and the very first movie that I saw you review was It. Stephen King's It, about the clown. So I thought you were going to be like especially being the discernment guy, I thought you were going to be like run away, stay away
Demons.
from this movie. As you know, Stephen King is filled with the host of Hades, and like I thought you were just going to be shredding it, but you were so fair. And in your assessment of the movie was just wonderful. It was just very refreshing. It was just very refreshing, and so I love your perspective. I love the way that you think and see things and deconstruct things. And so, dude, how did that? At what point were you like, what YouTube needs? YouTube needs like a discernment-based movie reviewer. Like how did that happen?
Yeah, great question. So going to the movie theater is actually quite an ordeal for me. It used to be way more than it is now, but it's still a thing. Going to any public place with a bunch of other people where you sit in a room for a couple hours and they have an emotional experience is drama for anybody who can pick this stuff up in the spirit, right? It's stuff's coming up. Their agreements are flooding that room, and it's so. I used to have to go on walks every time. You're like, yeah, but I typically wouldn't notice till after the movie was over, and then I'm like, and like the world just goes dark and everything's wrong, and I need to get away from everybody and don't talk to me. Yeah, that happened all the time. I think a lot of people.
Dude, I think you and I are probably complete opposites in this way. Like I'm so naive in a lot of these things. I'm just like,
nice. Well, yeah, that must be really nice for you.
Yeah.
So I used to have to go for a walk all the time afterward and just like process like what. So
it's incredible.
I learned how to just like go over the movie with the Lord and just like celebrate what I liked, like reflect on what I appreciate, whatever was good, noble, true, lovely, whatever. I would think on those things with the Lord and reflect on that stuff. And as I did, all the things that were trying to get at me from the theater left. I didn't have to bind anything or like cast anything out or would rebuke anything. I just communed with the Lord, and it took my shofar into the woods and just danced around. But as I just drew to the near to the Lord, and like we enjoyed the intimacy we shared, and I just looked at the movie with him, all the other stuff went away. But I didn't know how to do that. Anyway, it was actually a fascinating experience. Rated R. I went to go see it with a buddy of mine because I thought that movie traumatized me as a kid. It turns out it was actually like Clowns from Space or something that actually traumatized me. It wasn't.
That sounds horrible.
But I thought
Clowns
it was
from Hell.
Yeah, totally.
Part 4.
So I went and saw that movie, and I was shocked because when I left the theater, I felt so clear. I felt so unencumbered. There wasn't any sludge getting on me. I was like, what the heck is going on? I feel oddly awesome right now. And I just watched a rated R like movie of a demonic clown trying to kill a bunch of children, a lot of expletives, a lot of violence, darkness. How do I feel this way, right? I'm the discernment guy. Of course you would think, of course I'd walk out sludge. It wasn't the case. I was like, why is that? I got to reflect. Like there was so much hope and camaraderie and victory and overcoming in that movie. That was the main theme. It wasn't fear. It was hope, and it was overcoming and courage.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa. And it was friendship. And
wow.
And the bad guy was so explicit the whole time. You never wondered who the bad guy was. You never wondered who the good guy was. It was never in question. And so actually, spiritually, the lines were very clean. And so when you walk away from the spiritual discernment piece, I wasn't watching that movie through my own lens and filters and offenses. I was watching it according to my awareness of the spirit realm. And I walked away with a clean bill. I'm like, this is fascinating. You know what I mean? Because people judge according to the flesh.
Absolutely.
And that's so heinous. Like, it's not what's going on. When you look at the spirit of something, you could have a rom-com that's actually sludgy and disgusting, and it looks all like, you know, pretty and fine, but underneath of it, it's gross.
That's right.
So anyway, it's like not about the rating or the genre. It's about the spirit behind it. You know?
Wow. Okay, I just want to. So obviously, there's like a deep love for film.
Oh yeah, I love movies. I'm a human being. I love story, right? I mean, I guess maybe I love more than other people, but I think movies are fascinating, and there's such an interesting mechanism in our culture. Sorry, you asked me a question I didn't answer. Spirits in the Theater came from, I was teaching in my Discerning Spirits class at BSSM, and I was talking about the movie theater experience and just trying to like help people get a grid for it practically. Where does this stuff play out? How does this actually pertain to, you know, normal life? And there was someone in my class, like I think the second or third year I taught it, who worked in the film industry, and she came up to me and she was like, I think I made a statement, the movie theater is the new temple. I didn't mean to make a big, like, I wasn't supposed to be this big deal, but I was just like, hey you guys, this is where people are getting agreements on a regular basis. They go there weekly, they like have a huge value for this in their rhythm. They would never step in the foot of a church, but they go to the theater all the time, and they're being taught, like they're being indoctrinated, what's good, what's bad, their morality, you know, whatever. So she came up to me, she's like, oh my God, when you said that, she's like, this is a big deal. And when you talk about movies, this is a thing. You need to make a show. And she just kind of went, I was like, what? And so that kept being a conversation. Eventually, we executed this last year. So like a little over a year now, like shooting that stuff. And the whole point was just talking about what was happening behind the scenes. Because I think everyone is experiencing this. They're just not conscious of it. They're not aware. I went to a movie last night with my girlfriend. We were watching Gemini Man. And I don't want to give anything away, but there's a scene that happened. Specific characters having a certain dialogue. No spoilers, but... It's not a spoiler, but anyway, 5 minutes later, I looked at her and I was like, and I could tell, like, that scene, whatever. I looked at her and I was like, the room just shifted 5 minutes ago. She's like, really? How? And I could feel it because I could feel myself getting pulled into the ground. I was like, this sucks. I don't always catch it in the middle. Sometimes I do. Usually I catch it after, but I caught it in the middle. And she's like, what happened? I was like, what does it feel like? I was like, I thought about it for a second. I was like, sadness. It's sadness. And then she's like, I might be adding to that. I was like, what? She's like, yeah, I got sad 5 minutes ago. And she's like, I was like, oh, it wasn't just her. I think the room, like people, human beings, when they watch a character go through a journey.
You're partnering with that. Like,
well, it's not even necessarily like they're partnering with it. It's that it's being proposed to them and they're like considering it. And so that thing actually affects an atmosphere. Wow. And so you can pick that up. And so whether you're conscious of it or not doesn't mean you're not picking it up. You know what I mean? And I think people go see a movie and their review of a movie is actually based on the theater, the atmosphere of the theater, not the movie itself. There's so many times where our perception of how good or bad a movie was based on the people we watched it with, and not even their reaction. It was the atmosphere. Some people aren't that way. They're not spiritually aware, so they just observe and assess, you know, analytically. But a lot of times I think people have a very biased opinion about a movie based on the atmosphere they were in when they watched it, not necessarily just the film itself. I'm not saying they don't.
Sure.
So that's such a fascinating, like, dynamic there that I think is going on. And so the whole point of Spirits in the Theater, that series on my YouTube channel, is just talking about and just trying to raise some awareness on what we actually experience when we watch movies. What are we looking for? What do you want to pay attention to? You know, what's actually going on there, and how do you actually like say yes to the Lord in the midst of whatever you're watching, whatever the rating, whatever the genre, you know?
Have you seen Joker yet?
I have not.
Are you going to see it?
Yeah, of course I'm going to see that movie. Are you kidding? I'm like, what's going to happen? What I've heard some things. I'm like, I'm prepared for it to be kind of dark, but I want to see like how they portray this. Yeah, I
really want to see it too. Yeah, really bad.
And then like Christians will hear
but
this
with 4 kids.
Oh, yeah,
I just don't get to the temple very often anymore.
Oh my gosh, no. You got a lot of strong opinions from Christians, especially on what's okay and what's not okay, and they just created a whole nother law in this area. You know, I'm like, no, that's actually not biblical for you to have that attitude or perspective. And some people can see a movie and other people shouldn't, you know, based on where they're at or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, and I felt this way for most of my life, the Holy Spirit as occupied as I am with him, whatever's coming at me doesn't have a chance, really. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying it's very slim. And so, like, I'm not afraid of, like, the horror genre. I don't love horror. I love thrillers, though. I don't love horror. I'm not afraid of horror, though. Like, a lot of people, like, don't want to watch it because they're afraid.
Sure.
And they think that it's, like, evil and you're opening a door to hell and all this stuff. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm not saying that's already, like, a given. That's not just guaranteed. You can watch whatever and not be affected by it depending on what's going on with you and the Lord. You know what I mean? And so, like, that's a weird thing that I think a lot of people feel very opinionated on, and I think that I can get, like, crucified for some of that stuff. But I'm like, I mean, I can pretend for your sake and try and act like a Christian, or I could follow the Lord and not come under your rules and, like, experience what He's doing. You know,
Totally.
I don't want to be a stumbling block by any means, obviously. So I'm not trying to, like, I'm not going to die on this hill. But, like, we've got a lot of, like, religion and, like, superstition when it comes to, like, movies and stuff. And I'm not saying they don't affect you, they do. But what I'm after is, can you grow in your awareness and your competency in navigating those things, where you could even still watch something not great and recognize what's happening and take it to the Lord, and it not turn your life into a nightmare, you know?
Well, I love just how you're watching movies and how you're practicing your spirituality, because, like you said, a lot of people separate, like, I'm going to the theater, so I'm going to turn off my discernment now so that I can actually enjoy this movie. You know, versus you're just practicing the presence of the Lord and practicing what you're learning in the Spirit and all that. I think it's fascinating, and definitely would encourage people to check out your YouTube channel, because it's going to help them, I think, even be able to process actively and presently going through a movie, instead of just opening yourself up and just receiving everything, which I think a lot of times we do just in the name of escapism,
right?
You know,
which is not a good idea. I'm not condoning that, for the record.
Yeah, because it becomes
advisable.
like you sometimes we watch a movie in the same way that you would take a drag off of a cigarette. You just, I need this,
totally,
you know.
Yep.
And so I think any way that we can just stay active and stay present and stay participating with the presence of the Lord, I think. And so you're kind of teaching people how to do that as you process through these different reviews, which is really interesting.
It's a way of life, and one of the things I'm tackling right now, I'm a little nervous about it because it's hard to talk about, but the idea of being spirit-led, we are a very intellectual culture, right? We're Western, right, in our mindsets, and so a lot of us consult our brains when we're praying rather than talking to the Lord, because we don't know how to, like, lead from the Spirit. We don't know how to live from that place. And so when I'm talking about doing this in a movie theater, it's not like I'm sitting there trying to make it happen. It's a way of life, and I'm learning how to become aware of and function from somewhere else besides my brain, you know? And actively trying to find language to help other people tap into that, where we actually learn how to live from the Spirit. You don't turn it off when you go to the theater. The Lord doesn't leave you at the entrance and you pick up your relationship again when you leave. Like, He's in there with you. And so you experience, I mean, that's true for everything, that you get to commune with Him in all of the things. Even if there's corrupted stuff in it, the Lord hasn't left. And so how does He relate with you in that stuff? You know?
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. We're going to be going on to Hollywood, actually. So we're driving tonight.
Nice.
And we're going to be doing 2 days of podcast with various influencers there in the area. Not necessarily, I really wanted to get hold of a screenplay writer, and so I had a guy. He's actually a Muslim guy, and he's done some incredible stuff. He's been nominated for a Golden Globe and Emmy. He's actually in Jerusalem right now, so he wasn't able to do it.
Oh, dang!
And because I'd love to chat with some legit screenplay writers regarding the kind of the moral responsibility of a screenplay writer. Like, is the idea just to get butts and seats, or is there a responsibility to have some sort of redemptive You know, so and then I also met a gal that worked for Francis Ford Coppola and would read scripts before he'd go to his desk, and so both of those are gonna have to be maybe 2020 conversations. Okay. I bring all that up because for a guy that sees, you know, that watches a lot of movies and then reviews them, you can kind of begin to sense different patterns that are occurring even from the big screen to the little screen. My question is. Do you feel like there is like a redemptive or restorative bent that's starting to come to entertainment, or do you feel like that there still is like this sort of depravitist kind of bent in it and everything? And what's your own kind of you know, what are you kind of sensing and discerning? Is it the clashes of two sides, or you know? Yeah,
totally. I've actually wanted this recently. Is it becoming more redemptive, or have I just started noticing this more now? Has it always been this way? I don't know. I think it might actually be. There's a lot more intelligence and awareness now than there was before. But something that I think is fascinating about that conversation is there are people who are making movies for whatever the motive or whatever, but I think a lot of them, I think Hollywood especially, okay, error aside, delusion, craziness, nasty, whatever, aside from Hollywood, so I'm not condoning any of the craziness.
Sure.
I think there's a lot of sincerity coming from people in the film industry trying to make a statement, about social norms or societal pressures or whatever, where legitimately there's something in them crying out for freedom, crying out for understanding, for compassion, for mercy. They don't know how to say it like that, and they might even take up an aggressive, like, combative attitude to fight even like a religious thing or like a moral, like, oppression that people felt like they were trapped by or whatever. And so I actually see a lot of sincerity and beauty in, as heinous as their expression and attempt might look, a desire for wholeness and freedom and not being like trapped by someone else's demands on your life. I see a lot of that coming from Hollywood that I think is the Lord, that is his nature. He is like that. Oh, sorry.
You're good.
I think that there's a perversion of like, freedom means we have no morals. We have you don't get to judge me or whatever. And that's not true. So I think we can step into a lot of weirdness, but I think I see a lot of sincerity of like wanting to break out of like restriction and restraint and, like condemnation and punishment and accusation that is very kingdom in spite of all the other weird stuff. I see that rampant throughout, especially like Disney and Pixar. They've got a lot of that going on, but like in Hollywood in general, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of ugly stuff too, right? But I do see that, and that's real, and it's powerful, and that's necessary. And I think that Hollywood has had a huge influence in our culture in that way, and I love that. There's been a lot of error, right? I'm not saying Hollywood has done a great job of influencing us, but there are things in there that are super valuable, and they are kingdom. And so in that, I think there's a lot of redemption, and I think that that's a very influential place to be creating. I think that it is affecting culture. There are whole generations that had a certain attitude or thought about something because of a movie. They all adopted it immediately. It was a no-brainer. People wouldn't go into the water for the longest time because of Jaws, right? right. People have these ideas about salesmen or rich people based on the memes and tropes in movies. Like the bad guy's always the rich dude and the poor guy's the hero, right? That's a huge meme throughout most of the movies we see. And so there's a rampant attitude in our culture of rich people are corrupt and whatever, and then the poor people are the underdog and we got to take care of them. And that's actually not true in reality. It's often on the big screen, it's not real. And by and large, statistically, a lot of the wealthy people I've met are some of the most integrity-filled, generous, compassionate, upstanding people. And I've met a lot of poor people who have very corrupt morals and are not heroic at all. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying it's because they're rich or poor. I'm saying that like measurement doesn't plan out. It doesn't work. It's not true. But we see it very pronounced because it sells. People are buying it, Anyway, am I answering your question?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it would be kind of a funny, I don't know, like I could say kind of a comedy, like, right, where the rich people are the nice people and they're the heroes, and then the poor people are...
That would be really weird. I don't think people would watch it. They'd be like, "What the heck?" And it would get bashed so bad. It would not do well, probably, because the majority of the audience.
It's a musical, like the rich people are super sincere, like, "We love everybody. We're rich, rich, rich."
Oh my god. That would be awesome. It would tank, I'm sure. It would not go well. One other thing I want to point out in the movie conversation. Sorry, do you want to say something?
No.
Oh, one more thing I want to point out in the movie conversation is there is it's subtle, but I can feel it, and it's forced.
Yeah.
There's a moral narrative that comes through movies, through Hollywood, especially from the left, right? From the liberal side of things. It was very obvious to me when I watched that movie with Mark Wahlberg and Rose Byrne. I forget, they like adopt 3 kids in the foster care system, and then I forget what it was called, like families, I don't remember. Anyway, that is just an example. It happens all the time, where these morals are portrayed and established as a standard where it's shameful to not want this thing. It's shameful to want this thing. It's amazing to want this thing. And they formalize lifestyle choices or attitudes, and they lock people into a certain argument. And you're good if you believe this, you're bad if you don't.
Right.
That's not how the spirit realm works at all. And it's actually very vindictive and demonic in nature. It's gross. And we see it in politics a lot, obviously. But you see that in movies, and I'm like, oh, this is... And it grates against me so intensely when I see it, when I experience it, because I'm like, it's disgusting, and people have no idea it's happening, and it is shaping what they think is right or wrong in the world, and it is going to lead them into bondage, and it sucks. And if like a whole population believes this, it is going to have negative adverse effects on our life, you know, like, and that's awful. And so I see that coming from Hollywood as well, which I hate it. It's awful.
Wow. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
It's actually really good. And also being able to probably even host those kinds of conversations even with our kids.
Totally.
Like when you're able to discern a kind of this an agenda or a worldview that's trying to be locked down onto your, you know, onto your construct.
Totally.
And you be able to spot that and teach your kids how to spot that. Because I think that you're right. That happens a lot of times. We'll feel it, we'll sense it, we'll discern it. We'll be like, okay, yeah, I'm not into that, and then we'll just kind of move on. But without realizing perhaps the reprogramming, you know, that's taking place in that place. So that's really good.
Yeah.
Mike, you're awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation. Hit on so many different things, but man, I just love what you're doing. Love how you think, and also just this conversation, which is really an invitation for people that are resonating with these different areas where you're providing equipping for people to really connect with you, to check out your links in the show notes, and then anything cool that you got coming out, like a new book or a new kind of project that people should be like ready for because it's coming out.
Yeah. Actually, I just finished the outline to a book I've been trying to write for the last probably year. So we're going to start going to town getting that written out, but we just finished that this last week. So I've got a book coming out. I don't know what I'm calling it, but it's basically going to be my manifesto on discerning spirits.
Amazing.
Which I think will be so helpful, specifically for people who absorb information that way.
So that'd be like a 2020 project.
Probably.
2020
It'll probably
release.
hopefully come out 2020. Yeah. I don't know when. I can't promise that.
That'd be
I
great.
think somewhere in that year, yeah. We've got the Entrepreneurship event coming up in November. We've got another event coming up in, I want to say April. We don't have actual dates yet, but just something to be aware of. It's called, I forgot what we called it, but basically it's like starting your business. So this is like for people from the Entrepreneurship event going into, if you have a lawn care business, a carpet shampooing business, you're cutting hair, you're a coach, whatever, you want to take your business to the next level. You want to start your business, whatever. It's for the people in that phase of life where they have an idea, they've got a product, they've got a service, or they're already trying, and you want to get this thing moving.
Make
that
it happen.
business is for that. Yeah. So we've got a lot of push for the entrepreneurship stuff right now.
Yeah.
Super exciting. In July, we have our NUMA Symposium. So July 2020. We're gathering everyone that's part of whatever we're doing into one room. We're having an event. We're going to get on the same page. There'll be some teaching, but also connecting and networking here in Reading.
Yeah. That'd be amazing.
Lord willing, that's the plan. Yeah.
Dude, you're crushing it, man.
Thank you.
You're blowing it up.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for creating this time, this space. Thanks for having us over.
Totally. My
this
pleasure.
was great, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
Likewise.
All right.